Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be looking at something pretty incredible, the way our brains can actually rewire themselves. It's wild. And we're diving into some fascinating research from a scientific article with a very interesting title.
Okay.
It's called Who.
Wow, okay.
Now, before you grab your Korean dictionaries,
Right.
that translates to exploring new ways that the brain rewires.
It really does highlight how much we're still discovering
Yeah.
about this incredibly complex organ.
Right. It's like we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, let's talk about this whole idea of neural remodeling.
Sure. So essentially, it's how our brains kind of shape and refine their own circuitry, especially when we're young.
Okay.
It's a bit like starting with a massive tangle of wires
Right.
and then carefully snipping away the excess to create a streamlined, efficient network.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is this process so important? Why should we even care?
Well, this process is absolutely crucial for healthy brain development.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Our brains actually start with way more connections than they need.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like an overzealous artist using every color in the box
Right?
on the first draft.
Yeah.
So neural remodeling helps refine those connections,
Okay.
strengthening the ones that are useful and getting rid of the ones that aren't.
So it's kind of like a streamlining.
Exactly.
Making it more efficient.
Yeah, and when this process goes wrong, it can lead to some pretty serious problems like autism or epilepsy.
Oh, wow. So it's really important
Yeah, it's
for things to be working properly.
Yes.
So it's like our brains are constantly editing themselves, making sure that everything is running smoothly.
Exactly.
But how do scientists even study something as complex as brain rewiring?
That's a great question. And that's where our tiny friends, the fruit flies, come in.
Wait, hold on. We're learning about human brains
Yeah,
by studying flies.
exactly.
That's wild.
And there's a good reason for it.
Okay.
Fruit flies are actually relatively easy to study in the lab.
Okay.
And researchers can actually manipulate their genes and observe the effects on their brain development with incredible precision.
Okay.
This kind of research would be impossible to do in humans.
Oh, right, because of ethical reasons and things like that.
Absolutely.
So these flies are like tiny windows into the workings of our own brains.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. So what have scientists discovered using these buzzing brain models?
Well, a team at Oregon Health and Science University found something really unexpected.
Okay, I'm already intrigued.
They were studying a group of neurons in fruit flies called beat-va neurons. Va neurons.
Okay.
And these neurons were breaking all the previously established rules of brain rewiring.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What were these rule-breaking neurons up to?
Well, much of the previous research on rewiring in flies focused on the role of a hormone called ecdysone. Ecdysone. You can think of ecdysone like a conductor leading an orchestra,
Okay.
ensuring that all the musicians play their parts at the right time. Scientists thought it controlled the entire process of brain rewiring.
So it was thought to be essential.
Yeah, very important.
So what was different about these beat-va neurons? Were they ignoring the conductor's cues?
Exactly.
Wow, okay.
The researchers discovered two types of beat-va neurons,
Okay.
each with its own distinct personality, you could say.
Okay.
The first type, called beat-val neurons, are found on the sides of the fly's body.
Beat-val.
Beat-val.
Okay.
Some of these neurons actually undergo programmed cell death,
Okay.
also known as apoptosis.
Programmed cell death, that sounds a bit intense.
It is, but it's a normal part of development.
Okay.
Think of it like demolishing an old building
Right.
to make room for a new, improved structure.
Okay.
In this case, certain neurons are intentionally eliminated to make way for a more refined and efficient brain network.
So it's like a controlled demolition within the brain.
Precisely. And here's the twist.
Okay.
This particular demolition crew is actually directed by our old friend ecdysone.
Oh, so it still plays a role.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so for these beat-val neurons, the conductor is still calling the shots.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But you said there were two types of beat-val neurons, right?
Right.
What about the other ones?
Yes. The other type, called beat-vam neurons, are located more centrally in the fly's body.
Beat-vam.
Beat-vam.
Okay.
These neurons undergo a different kind of remodeling called neurite pruning.
Neurite pruning.
Basically, their connections or neurites get trimmed back like the branches of a tree.
Okay, so both types of neurons are being streamlined.
Yes.
But in different ways.
Exactly.
What's so unusual about that?
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The beat-vam neurons those rebellious conductors, were undergoing this pruning completely independently of ecdysone.
Hold on, you're telling me these neurons are rewiring themselves without any direction from the hormone that was thought to control the entire process?
That's exactly what the researchers found.
Wow.
They were completely baffled.
Yeah, I bet.
One of the scientists even said, in the fly brain, if you block the ecdysone signaling within other types of neurons, you block everything.
That is a huge plot twist.
It is.
It's like discovering that a plant can grow without sunlight.
Exactly.
So if ecdysone isn't calling the shots for these beat-vam neurons, what is?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it led the researchers down a fascinating path.
Okay.
They started to suspect that there might be other players involved.
Okay.
In this intricate dance of brain rewiring.
Right.
And that's where astrocytes enter the picture.
Astrocytes, I've heard that term before, but I can't quite remember what they are.
Well, astrocytes are a type of glial cell.
Okay.
Think of them as the support staff for neurons.
Okay.
Providing structural support and nutrients, kind of like the stage crew.
Right.
In a theatrical production.
Okay, so they're important, but not the main actors.
That's what we used to think. But it turns out these astrocytes have a much more active role in brain rewiring.
Oh, wow.
Than we previously realized.
Yeah.
Remember those beat-vam neurons that were undergoing pruning without ecdysone's direction?
Yes.
Well, the researchers discovered that astrocytes were somehow involved in that process.
Okay, now I'm really curious. How did they figure that out?
Well, they conducted a series of really clever experiments.
Okay.
Manipulating the levels of ecdysone in different types of cells to see how it affected the pruning process.
Okay.
And what they found was that when they blocked ecdysone signaling, specifically in astrocytes, the beat-vam pruning was significantly reduced.
So even though ecdysone wasn't directly controlling the beat-vam neurons, it was influencing the astrocytes, which in turn were impacting those neurons.
Exactly.
That's wild.
It really highlights the complexity and interconnectedness of the brain.
For sure.
It's not just neurons talking to each other.
Right.
There's a whole symphony of cellular communication going on, with different players influencing each other in subtle but powerful ways.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But I have to admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what exactly these astrocytes are doing.
Right.
And how they're impacting those beat-vam neurons. It sounds like we need to take a deeper dive into the world of astrocytes to really understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
So I guess that means stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned.
To part 2.
We'll be right back. Welcome back.
Yeah, before the break, we were talking about those rule-breaking beat-vam neurons and how they were somehow being influenced by astrocytes during brain rewiring. And to be honest, my brain is still buzzing a bit from that last revelation.
It's a game changer for sure.
Yeah.
And the more we learn about astrocytes, the more fascinating they become.
Yeah, because I always thought they were kind of passive support cells, but it sounds like they're playing a much more dynamic role.
For a long time, they were overshadowed by neurons.
Yeah.
But now we're realizing they're crucial.
Okay.
For all sorts of brain functions, including learning, memory, and even how the brain responds to injury.
Wow. Okay, so maybe we should think of them more like the directors of the play.
Yeah.
Not just the stage crew.
Exactly.
But how do they actually influence the brain rewiring process? I'm still struggling to picture it.
Well, imagine those beat-vam neurons, like a garden with overgrown branches.
Okay.
Needing a good trim.
Yeah.
Well, the astrocytes are like those meticulous gardeners.
Right.
Carefully pruning away the excess connections.
Okay.
Shaping the neural network for optimal growth and efficiency.
So they're not just providing support, they're actively shaping the brain's structure.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Remember how we talked about those beat-vam neurons going rogue?
Yeah.
Remodeling without ecdysone's direction?
Yes.
Well, it turns out the astrocytes might be the ones calling the shots in this particular pruning party.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense, but how do the astrocytes actually do the pruning? Do they have tiny little scissors?
Not quite, but they do have a fascinating trick up their sleeve.
Okay.
Remember how the researchers found that blocking ecdysone in astrocytes messed up the pruning process?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out ecdysone triggers some astrocytes to become phagocytic.
Phagocytic. Now, that's a word I haven't heard in a while. Remind me what it means again.
Think of phagocytes as the ultimate cleanup crew.
Okay.
They engulf and digest cellular debris.
Right.
Sort of like those Pac-Man characters gobbling up dots in a video game.
Okay, I'm picturing it now. So the astrocytes become these Pac-Man-like cells chomping away at unwanted neuronal connections.
Oh, got it.
That's a pretty cool image.
And when the researchers blocked ecdysone in the astrocytes, those astrocytes couldn't become phagocytic. And guess what?
What happened?
The beat VAM pruning was significantly reduced.
So it's like the cleanup crew went on strike.
Exactly.
And the garden of our brain got all overgrown and messy. This is seriously cool stuff. But I have to ask, how does any of this relate to us humans? We're not fruit flies after all.
That's the beauty of basic research.
Okay.
While this study was done in flies, it highlights a fundamental principle of brain development that likely applies across species, including humans.
So you're saying that we might have these same pruning gardeners hard at work in our own brains?
It's highly likely.
Wow.
And the implications are huge.
Yeah.
Think about conditions like stroke or traumatic brain injury,
Right.
where there's damage to brain circuitry.
Mm-hmm.
What if we could understand how to stimulate these astrocytic gardeners to help repair those damaged connections?
Now that would be incredible. We're talking about potentially rewiring the brain to heal itself. Are scientists actually exploring that possibility?
Absolutely. There's a ton of research going on right now looking at how we might be able to manipulate these pruning processes to treat a whole range of neurological conditions.
What other conditions could potentially benefit from this kind of research?
Well, there's growing evidence that abnormalities in neural pruning during development might be linked to neurodevelopmental disorders, like autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
What if we could fine-tune this pruning process, helping to guide the brain toward healthier development?
That's mind-boggling, but it also feels ethically complex. I mean, if we're talking about manipulating brain development, where do we draw the line?
You raise an important point.
Yeah.
It's crucial that as we delve deeper into these possibilities, we do so with a deep sense of responsibility and caution.
For sure, because we've got these amazing possibilities for treating diseases and potentially even enhancing brain function.
Right.
But I'm also wondering, if brain rewiring is happening all the time, does that mean our brains are constantly changing?
That's exactly right. Our brains are incredibly plastic, constantly adapting to new experiences and information.
Okay.
Every time you learn a new skill, form a new memory, or even just have a new thought, those neural connections are being strengthened or weakened, literally shaping the physical structure of your brain.
So in a way, we're all constantly rewiring our brains, whether we're aware of it or not.
Absolutely.
Wow. And this research suggests that there might be ways to consciously influence this process to shape our brains in beneficial ways.
Exactly. And that's where things get really exciting.
Yeah, that's both exciting and a little daunting. It feels like we're stepping into uncharted territory. What are some of the specific research avenues that scientists are pursuing in this field?
One really fascinating area is optogenetics.
Optogenetics.
Which allows researchers to use light to control the activity of specific neurons.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking like controlling brain cells with light? That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
It might sound futuristic, but it's a reality in many neuroscience labs today.
Wow.
Researchers are using optogenetics to map out neural circuits involved in everything from movement to memory to emotion. And by manipulating the activity of specific neurons, they can start to understand how those circuits contribute to behavior and cognition.
So how does this tie into brain rewiring?
Well, imagine being able to precisely target those beat VAM neurons we've been talking about.
Right.
The ones that undergo pruning independently of ecdysone. With optogenetics, we could potentially manipulate their activity, studying how they connect with other neurons and how that pruning process influences brain function.
This is blowing my mind. We're talking about the potential to literally rewire the brain with light. Are there other techniques being explored?
Definitely another promising area is the study of neurotrophic factors.
Okay. I'm going to need a quick refresher on what those are.
Think of neurotrophic factors as brain fertilizer.
Okay.
They're molecules that promote the growth, survival, and differentiation of neurons.
Okay.
They're essential for healthy brain development. And researchers are exploring how different neurotrophic factors can influence neuroplasticity and potentially promote rewiring in both the developing and adult brain.
So like giving those astrocytic gardeners extra strength fertilizer to help them prune and reshape the brain more effectively.
That's a great way to put it. And this has huge potential for treating conditions like Alzheimer's disease.
Oh, okay.
Where there's a loss of neurons and connections.
Right. I can definitely see how boosting those neurotrophic factors could be incredibly beneficial in those situations. It feels like we're on the verge of a whole new era of brain science. But before we get too carried away, I'm curious to hear more about the ethical considerations surrounding this research. We touched on it briefly earlier, but I think it deserves a deeper dive of its own.
You're absolutely right. The ethical implications of brain rewiring are profound and complex.
Yeah.
It's not just about the potential for treating diseases. It's about the very essence of what it means to be human.
Okay, that is deep. It sounds like we need to take a moment to really unpack those ethical complexities. We'll delve into that fascinating and potentially mind-blowing conversation after a quick break. Welcome back. Before the break, we were starting to touch on some pretty weighty topics. The ethics of brain rewiring and what this all means for our understanding of what it makes us, well, as us.
It's definitely a topic that deserves careful consideration.
Yeah.
We're talking about potentially altering the very essence of who we are, our thoughts, our memories, our personalities.
It feels like we're standing on the edge of this vast unknown with incredible potential for both good and perhaps some unintended consequences.
That's a great way to put it. The possibilities are both exhilarating and daunting. On the one hand, we have the potential to alleviate immense suffering, to help people regain lost function, to potentially even enhance cognitive abilities. But we also need to be mindful of the potential for misuse, for unintended consequences, for altering what we consider to be the fundamental nature of human experience.
It's like we stumbled upon this powerful new tool, but we're still figuring out how to use it safely and responsibly.
Exactly. And as with any powerful tool, we need to establish clear ethical guidelines to have these open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits, to ensure that these technologies are used for the betterment of humanity and not for exploitation or manipulation.
That's a really important point. It's a conversation that needs to involve scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public at large.
Absolutely. We need diverse perspectives to help guide us as we navigate this uncharted territory.
Okay, so we've explored this incredible potential of brain rewiring, but we've also acknowledged the ethical complexities. What I'm left wondering is, what does this all mean for our understanding of ourselves, of what it means to be human?
That's a profound question, and one that philosophers and scientists have been grappling with for centuries. I think this research challenges us to rethink some of our fundamental assumptions about who we are. If our brains are constantly changing, constantly rewiring themselves in response to our experiences, then what does it mean to have a fixed identity?
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling, isn't it, to think that who we are today might be fundamentally different from who we were yesterday or who we'll be tomorrow.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering. It means we're not fixed. We're not limited by our initial wiring. We have the potential to learn, to grow, to evolve throughout our lives.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that we're all works in progress, constantly shaping and reshaping ourselves. This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've explored these intricate mechanisms of brain rewiring, from those rule-breaking neurons in fruit flies to the potential for treating diseases and enhancing cognitive function in humans. We've even ventured into the ethical complexities of manipulating the very essence of who we are.
And we've just scratched the surface. This field of research is exploding, with new discoveries pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
It's both humbling and incredibly exciting. It feels like we're witnessing this revolution in our understanding of the human brain, and the possibilities just seem endless.
I couldn't agree more. And the most important thing is to stay curious, to keep asking questions, to embrace the mystery and wonder of this incredible organ that makes us who we are.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of brain rewiring. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of discovery.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.